Welcome back to another edition of Warrior Spirit. Today I'm with a good friend of mine, Michelle, the Rockstar Coach and Intuitive. Michelle, welcome to the show and thank you for your time today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Daryl.
I appreciate that. One of the things that I love about you is your energy, and I think that comes from your name, the Rockstar Coach, right? So how do
Sure.
you become the Rockstar Coach?
Well, I mean, you can just decide I'm a rock star, which that's totally fine.
Yeah.
um, but I actually am a rock star. So I've been singing since I was a kid. I mean, I didn't come out of the womb a rock star, clearly, but well, maybe I did, but
No guitar in hand.
yeah, exactly. um, but I grew up singing, and now, most recently, for the last 13 years, I've been a lead singer in a pop rock show band in the Atlanta area. So I used to get called rock star in what I call a previous life. When I was a real estate broker, people would call me rockstar realtor. And so when I decided to really claim my coaching identity, I just thought, well, I might as well claim that too. So hence the rockstar coach. So I still do sing on the weekends, but during the week, I'm the rockstar coach.
Nice. And so what made you transition from real estate to coaching? Because I had that similar transition in background. So
Yeah, you did. That's
yeah.
right. Um, I was a broker and a managing broker. So I had about 50 agents that
Mhm.
I coached
Mhm.
on a very regular basis, daily basis most of the time. And as you well know, you also coach your clients. I mean,
Mhm.
it's really kind of a bit of psychology. I mean, it's kind of like being a hairdresser, you sit in the chair and you just start talking to them, right?
Right.
They hear everything. Well, as realtors, we heard everything.
Mhm.
And so it was a lot of coaching in that. And then I realized when I took on the managing broker role, what I loved the most was helping my agents to succeed,
Mhm.
helping them as far as coaching, to really come up with systems and plans. And interestingly enough, I was really good at helping them with their mindset. So
Mhm.
that really was a very easy transition when I decided to go full time into coaching. It just seemed like the perfect fit, and it has been.
Well, you're also an intuitive, and you said that over the years you've become comfortable coming out of the closet as an intuitive and a psychic. When did you first discover you had those gifts, and did you embrace them right away, even though you were in the closet, or did you kind of shy away from them?
Well, initially, I was very young. So I had, as a lot of people did, and it's interesting, uh, a- I dare say most people have the gifts. A
Yes.
lot of them don't understand it, realize it, claim it, whatever. But I grew up with an imaginary friend. I was very, very shy, an introvert, as I still am, if you can believe that. Um, but I created apparently this friend that I played with. Played games with, would play dolls with, whatever. Um, and that seemed normal to me. There were other things that happened to me, not just like having a conversation with my imaginary friend. I would hear things, I would see things. I didn't ever, because I was so quiet, I didn't ever really talk about it.
Mhm.
But I did realize that other people weren't talking about hearing things or seeing things. And so something clued me in right away that this might not be, quote, normal.
Mhm.
So I didn't express it. As I got older, I did say a few things. I did relay some experiences that I had, and it was not embraced. And so I learned that that was not something we talked about.
Mhm.
I grew up in a family that was very, my mother is very religious, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with it. I'm a spiritual being. You are a spiritual being. I
Yes.
know that I got my gifts from God, but not everyone that believes a certain way believes the gifts that I know I've been given are actually from God. And so it's not always welcomed to talk about. It wasn't honestly until a few years ago, through my own self-healing, etc., in my life in general, when I really decided to take control of my own life and live my life for myself instead
Mhm.
of other people, that I decided to explore this world a little bit more, and these gifts that I had kind of put on a back burner or the shelf. And once I opened up to them and started really working on developing them, I mean, they just, have flown in. And so I have become very comfortable in claiming who I am. It's just so important for each of us as individuals to express ourselves in the way that we were created to express ourselves, because
Mhm.
somebody else needs to hear that. Somebody else needs to see that in you. And so I'm very, very grateful, even if it was later in my life, so to speak, that I was able to come to that realization and the comfort level, and the self confidence.
I find it interesting because I call myself a Reformed Catholic. My mom and my paternal or my maternal side was extremely Catholicism, and then my dad's side was evangelical. So Saturday was mass, Sunday was church, and I have this blend of more spirituality because I find I am more in touch with God looking at a rock on a mountain than in a pew in a church. But it's funny as you dive into that part of life, everything that we're gifted with is actually biblical if people want to put it back. The healing, the energy, the thinking, the mindset, it's all biblically based. So it is a spiritual gift from God. And most people in my 50 some years of doing this shy away from it because they're afraid of the conflict between the religion and the spirituality, but they're actually in unison with each other, which is, quite the dichotomy that if they actually dove into that, they'd just be like, oh, okay, so this is a gift that I can embrace because I am unique. And you said something about people, worrying about their gifts and stuff. And I always tell my clients, like, go to a bread aisle in a grocery store. Like there's 30 different kinds of bread, but they're all sliced in a package, but somebody's buying all 30 slices. So somebody's going to buy your voice and hear your voice and need your voice, right? So bring
Absolutely.
it forth. You
Absolutely.
mentioned overcoming some of your mess, right? And your
Mm-hmm.
life goes like this.
Yeah.
Uh, can you share a little bit of where that mess started and how you transitioned over it?
Yeah. Um, it's interesting. I've just been doing, as we are speaking today, we are just after the new year. And so it's been a perfect time to reflect on
Mhm.
some things from the past, which I have done. And so this is very fresh in my mind. I I was, and I am again, but I took a break. I was a very positive person. Um, in my teen years, early 20s, I actually was called naive.
Mm.
Um, and I understand why I was called naive. I always saw the good in people, I always gave everyone the benefit of the doubt. And I was never anyone that watched a lot of television. So I didn't get that negative influence from
Mhm.
the outside world very much. I kind of lived in my own little bubble. And I didn't do that consciously. I know now why I did, because as an empath, we take on so
Mhm.
much of the outside world's energy. And so I did it as a self protection unconsciously.
Right.
Um, and so I say that because part of my mess was I didn't even see it as a mess. I moved from Arizona when I was 24, to do music, to be in the music industry. So I moved to Tennessee. And when I did that, I didn't have a job. I just, yeah, let's go to Tennessee. Why not? I mean, I felt like, God was calling me there. So I went there. So I found myself with $1.50 to my name. I ended up living out of my car for a bit.
Mhm.
I had to sublease my apartment because I had no money. One thing was I was irresponsible. I mean, I'll be honest and own that. The other part was I just didn't worry about things. And
Mhm.
so I found myself in a mess, but I got out of the mess by using my mindset that actually was probably part of the reason I got into the mess.
Right.
But I didn't worry about the outcome. I knew, and I know now that it was my claircognizance. But I just knew everything was going to work out for me. And it did. It always did. And it didn't come without the highs and the lows because I wasn't doing it in a conscious way where I understood how to create that consistency. Um, so I got married, made a ton of money in real estate, and then boom, got divorced. Well, anybody that's been through a divorce knows what happens in a divorce. It's messy,
Mhm.
even if it's amicable. You have to move, you have to divide assets, all of those things. There's hurt and heartache and um, disappointments and reflection on yourself where you think, why did I do this? Why did I get into this in the first place? How did I get myself in this spot? All of those things, even when you're with a wonderful person that it's just time to move on, which was my situation. Um, so I found myself in a mess thinking, what am I going to do now? I really don't love real estate, even though I make a shit ton of money doing it.
Yep.
I don't really love it. It doesn't set my soul on fire. So now what? So I picked up and I moved again because even though I had become more of a realist and lost that naivete, I knew that I had to make a change and it probably needed to shake my world. Otherwise, it probably wasn't going to be something that would stick. That's just me. And so I moved to Georgia. My band is out of Georgia, and I had been traveling back and forth. And so I just picked up my life and I decided to start anew. I did that. And I didn't know what I was going to do because my business was still in Nashville
Mhm.
and I was now in the Atlanta area. I I just listened. And Daryl, you know what I'm talking about.
Mhm.
I just listened for that voice, for some sort of message, for some sort of clarity in direction. And I didn't always get it when I wanted it,
Mhm.
but I continued to take the steps forward. And still to this day, that was 4 years ago, still to this day, I'm taking those steps forward. The future isn't always clear for us, but when we listen, when we are in my experience connected,
Mhm.
when we trust and surrender, that's when the magic happens. And so these messes that we find ourselves in can be, quote, easily um, traversed
Mhm.
because we know, even though we don't know how or when, we know that we will get through it and that there is a purpose in everything that we go through.
I think a lot of us, like, and I said to you earlier, I'm starting to listen to the voices I don't need medication from, but in order to do that, you have to start calming those muddy waters within yourself. And it's very humanistic to say, Jesus, take the wheel, but turn left here. Like, we still want to like guide and grab. And
Yep.
until we actually surrender, like you said, to the process, it still stays chaotic and we question, right? But when we do surrender, then it calms itself down and works itself out. And like you, I was living out of my car for a while. And when we're going through our mess, whatever that is for us, we're not sitting there saying, thank you, God, I appreciate the learning opportunity for years down the road, right?
Yeah.
We still want to try to find our way out of it. But I found all of my messes have been preparation for something better down the road. And sometimes it's decades. Like for me right now, I lived out of my car when I was in my 20s. Well, now 30 years later, I can use that to help others. And I have, in my coaching practice and in some of my other jobs. But we have to find the way out of the mess. And it's not by being toxic positivity.
Right.
That's like unicorns and rainbows and everything's sunshine and good, but it is finding the silver lining and the solution to the problem. And there's a big difference in that.
Yeah.
As an intuitive and as a spiritual person, did that have some effect on your marriage? Was it a piece of what separated you?
I didn't realize it at the time, but absolutely it did, because I realized after that I was not being true to who I was,
Mhm.
because I had left this really big piece of who I am out of our relationship because I was not looking at it. I chose not to see it. How can somebody love you fully if they don't know you fully?
Right.
I didn't even love myself fully because I knew myself fully, but I didn't want to admit to myself who I was. And so right there, I'm denying myself. And so, no fault of my ex-husband, he didn't even know me. I
Mhm.
mean, honestly, to this day, I'm sure that the story has gotten to him, but I have no idea if he would have accepted me. And that's okay because I'm here now and I accept me. But when you're not true to yourself, when you are denying a piece or a part of yourself, there's really no way to have truly successful relationships. So yeah, I would have to say, and that's a really interesting question that I'm very glad you asked, because I'm not sure that I have ever thought of it in that way.
Well, I find that when we deny a piece of ourselves, and we're not living in our authentic life. And I don't care if that's being an entrepreneur trying to fit into a 9 to 5 job, a spiritual person trying to fit into a church, an intuitive, ignoring your gifts, whatever it is. When we're not living our authentic life, we keep running from our life, and then we're there with the same mess and wondering why we're getting the same results. But when
Yeah.
we go inside, we accept who we are and what we are, and we embrace that fully and express it fully, then the right person is going to find us. My
Yeah.
wife and I talk about all the time that we wish we'd have met earlier because we ran in similar circles when I lived here before.
Uh-huh.
We never crossed paths. And I always tell her we were never ready for each other back then.
That's
And
right.
until you're ready to embrace who you are, you're not ready for the relationship outside of who you are.
Yeah.
And I'm finding that a lot of people who are living inauthentically and trying to dim their light and hiding, they're unhappy with their relationship, they're unhappy with their relationship with their kids, their spouse, their family. But really, if they examine it, they're unhappy with the relationship with themselves.
Yes.
And when they correct that part of it, then they blossom and they're like, oh my goodness, look at, I can see color now and out of these glasses, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I
And
was just reminded when you were speaking, from the outside, and this is part of my story, from the outside, I looked like I had everything, you know. I
Mhm,
mean, people used to call my ex-husband and I Ken and Barbie. I mean, we
mhm,
looked like the perfect couple. We lived in the perfect neighborhood.
mhm,
You know, we both had very successful careers, making a really good living. We got to go on really nice vacations. We drove really nice cars, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And yet there was something missing.
mhm,
And, you know, obviously relationships can be complicated. So it wasn't just one thing. But yes, if I had known or um, embraced who I truly was, perhaps I would have been happy. Perhaps I wouldn't have been making the money that I was making, but I would have been happy. Or perhaps I would have had it all, because we can have it all. You know, there, I think there's also a misnomer. I don't want to digress, but there's a misnomer that we can't have it all. You know, we can't have the love and
yeah,
the money and the career, whatever, but we can. We
yes.
absolutely can.
So how did you work yourself into loving yourself? What was your trigger point that said, "I'm the problem"?
That's a really good question.
I'm allowed one per show.
Okay, that's the
That's
only one then.
that's the only one I get.
Tick. Um, it's a good question because I don't really know that there was one specific trigger moment. It's
Mhm,
been a process.
mhm,
I think if I'm looking for the catalyst, it it really was, as odd as this may sound, it really was losing my beloved dog. So I had two dogs. Now they are both transitioned, but the first one that I lost, it was the first real deep loss that I had had. I've lost people, but they weren't people close enough to me that, you know, it
mhm,
was devastating. But that was devastating. And that was, that probably was the time where I was so deep in grief and sadness
mhm,
that it took me to a place in my heart that I had never been before. I had I had never truly opened my heart. I had had a wall up for
mhm,
so many years. And so when we put walls up, we we don't take on the negative.
mhm,
We don't really hurt, but we also can't receive the good. And so by doing that, I learned how to protect myself so much that I was also protecting myself from me. And
mhm,
I thought that love equaled hurt. I had been through a divorce. I had grown up not feeling like I was enough. And no fault of my parents, they're human. They did the best they could. And God forbid they see this and think they did an awful job. No, we're all humans. It was my belief. I didn't feel like I was good enough. And so because I didn't feel like I was good enough, I wasn't worthy of being loved
mhm,
by anyone else, and certainly not by myself. So I think going to that depth of pain allowed me to look at myself, get into my heart space, and say, wow, something has to change here because I have to get out of this.
mhm,
And I know there's more not right than just losing my beloved animal. And so that catapulted me really, you know, through the process of self development and learning to learning that I was enough, learning that I am enough, that I just am, that I am worthy. And because of that, I'm worthy of love and abundance and all of those things. And so it starts with me. If I can't love myself, like we said, nobody else can truly love me. And I knew that something had to change.
So now that you've come out of the spiritual closet
Yeah.
and you've embraced your gifts, how has your life changed and improved?
Uh, I'm not, I am a glimpse of who I was before. And other people may not see it because on the outside, I probably look very much the same because, like I said, I was always very positive,
Mhm.
and that hasn't changed. But the inside is what's changed. And so, because of that, my whole world is opened up. I know that there are no limitations, none. I can do whatever it is that in my soul I feel I want or I'm being called to do. I can be who I truly am. I am free. I am free of fear of judgment of other people because they're only on their own journey. If
Mhm.
they judge and criticize, that has nothing to do with me.
Right.
And so being able to use my gifts to help other people, whether it's doing intuitive readings or coaching women to, love themselves and be self-empowered and take on the world and create a life that they love like I have, it's such freedom. And one thing that I will say that has come up actually twice today, so I feel like it bears some sharing. Since I have claimed who I am and come out of the spiritual closet, I have more people tell me on a very regular basis how I inspire them just by my energy.
Mhm.
And I never understood that before. Um, and I love that. What a blessing to be able to just enter a room and make people feel better just by being there. And
Mhm.
I don't pat myself on the back for that. It's just, it's who I am and it's the work that I've done and it's the work that I continue to do. And we all have it. We just are, we're on our own journeys and we may be in a different space, but it's a beautiful thing. And so that gives me pure joy. It truly, truly does.
So if you were to impart um, a bit of wisdom on somebody who's trying to come out of their own spiritual closet, what would you say to that person?
Give yourself grace. Um, if you want to jump in the deep end, with no life vest, go for it. Most empaths are not going to do it that way. It is a process. It is it is not easy to let yourself be seen. If you are a true empath, it is not easy to let yourself be seen and be vulnerable because there is judgment around spirituality and especially if you have gifts of clairvoyance or audience or cognizance, all of those people will look at you like you have three heads. But just remember, after you're giving yourself grace, just remember that their judgment has nothing to do with you and that you were called to this life, to this purpose for a very, very unique, specific reason. And if you don't do it, no one else will. So it's your call. It is time to step up. So go easy on yourself, but go for it all the same. And reach out for help because there are plenty of us, Daryl, that embrace you, love you, feel you, understand you. Find your tribe because it is out there waiting for you.
Yeah, I think that's a vital piece of the puzzle, is that a lot of us feel like we're alone because we did come from a background of having to dim our light and not talk about it and not fully express who we are. So we think that we're alone because no one else is talking about it, or when we do, they shut us down.
Yeah.
So I think it's very important to, find your tribe. That's exactly what I call my community. And it's amazing how many people, when you start shining that light, become attracted to you, and then you find out, oh, I'm not alone, right? I am in a like-minded area, and you start to actually feel better and embrace it. So I think that's a very vital part to the healing too,
Yeah.
because we can't do this alone, right? Alone is
No.
what dimmed our light in the first place.
Absolutely. I'll never forget that when I took my first big step out there on social media on my personal page
Mhm.
and was like, "Hey world, here I am." I will never forget the number of people that not only commented on the post itself, but what was even more interesting, the ones that messaged me privately saying, I feel the same way. I have seen things, I have heard things, but I thought I was alone, right? And so just people reaching out with that sentiment of thank you. Thank you. Now I know I'm not, crazy, like you said.
Right.
I don't need medication. Um, but thank you for taking that step. Now I know that maybe it's safe for me to take a step.
Well, I think it's also important to, you know, because you have these gifts and because you are not dimming your light anymore, doesn't necessarily mean you have to turn it into a business. There are
Right.
ways to help people. Like I look back and I feel like I've been coaching for 40 years. I just never called it coaching, right?
Yeah.
But there are ways to use those gifts to just help ordinary people in ordinary lives. You don't have to put it into business form. It's great if you do, and you'll be blessed for sure. But I don't, I think people feel like, oh, if I embrace my gifts, I have to make it a business. You don't. You just have to share your gift with the world and help those in your little corner of the world.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so many things that you can do just by being a sensitive person. If you are an empath and you're sensitive to somebody feeling a certain way, you pick that up in the grocery store and you can change someone's life. I
Mhm.
I was just speaking to a friend last week who one of her, experiences was she knew that this person that she just met was thinking about committing suicide. And they were at an event together. And so she asked her, would you like to go have dinner after the event is over? And the woman agreed. They had dinner. She felt the energy calm down, moved on. They continued to be friends. To this day, they're very good friends. And the woman eventually admitted, that day that we met, I was actually thinking about committing suicide. So if she hadn't listened and taken action, what could have happened? And so it does not have to be something where you change careers or you move across country or across the world. You can simply change somebody's life or affect somebody's life by listening and saying, are you okay? Can I take you to dinner? Make a phone call, whatever that may be in that moment. That's all it needs to be.
I think that's a vital, important piece of just A, being a human, but B, being someone who's going to actually share your gifts, right? I'm going to ask you two final questions. What is your, other than grace, because, and it's funny because I tell my wife all the time, put away Thor's hammer. You don't need to beat yourself up that badly, right? Because if we talked to friends like we talk to ourselves, we wouldn't have any friends.
That's right.
So you got to have that grace. But other than grace, what is your biggest takeaway from your journey so far?
Mm, surrender. That has been a huge word. I have grown up, I think, with trust issues. And so to surrender really means to trust. And that has been an ongoing journey for me, sometimes multiple times a day. But I will say I believe that it's the biggest, it's created the biggest shift in my life, in my journey.
Yeah, I think that's goes back to that Jesus take the wheel, but get your hands off of it, right?
Yeah.
We it's funny because we will ask for guidance, and then when we hear guidance, we either have one of three reactions. Okay, I'm all in. What the hell did you just say?
Uh-huh.
Or are you sure? Right?
Yeah.
But
Can you check again?
yeah, like you're shaking the magic 8 ball for a different answer, right?
Yeah.
But I think that when you do surrender, because we as humans want to see the entire big picture, but when you just leap in faith and take that first step, the rest of the picture comes as we need it. And faith, if you see the big picture, isn't faith, that's knowledge. Faith is doing it when you can't see the big picture, right?
Yeah.
And that's where the surrender comes in. And we, I think, as humans, fight that way too hard. So I love that that's your word for helping. And then the last thing that I ask all my guests, because you're a part of my tribe and because you're a part of a warrior spirit, what does being a warrior and a warrior spirit mean to you?
Mm. Picking yourself back up every single day. Sometimes, like I said, multiple times a day. It can sometimes feel like a battle, certainly out there in the world, right? But also in here.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we're doing this with ourselves. Sometimes it's because of that need or desire for control. And so, being a warrior to me is waking up every day, putting the armor on, grabbing your tool belt, going inside, doing the practices, doing the things that work for you to be able to get you where you need to go that day. What are your intentions for that day? All right, let's go do it. And it doesn't necessarily have to feel like a battle, but I promise you, if your intention is to create change in the world, you will come across a battle.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so remembering that as a warrior, as a spiritual warrior, you've already won. You will not be defeated. So you can step out there in confidence and know that no matter how difficult it becomes, you will prevail. So no fear, like no holds barred, just go for it. You are a warrior and you've already won.
I love it. Well, I appreciate you today, and I'm going to post a link to your site so that people can get a hold of you if they'd like to reach out and express, their own inner warrior. And I appreciate you being in part of my tribe and my circle. And may 2023 be a blessing to all of us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Daryl. It was a pleasure.
All righty. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.